Most gardeners are taught one fundamental rule from day one. If you want huge, healthy vegetables, you put them directly into rich, in-ground garden soil. And for big squash vines, sweet corn, or sprawling indeterminate heirloom tomatoes, that rule holds up. But there's a biological blind spot here. Garden soil isn't always the ideal environment for every crop. In fact, ground soil can actively hold certain vegetables back. Ground soil is heavy. It stays cold weeks longer in the spring. It harbors resting fungal spores like verticillium and fusarium wilt, and you have zero control over moisture levels when prolonged spring rains hit. Containers, on the other hand, solve those exact issues. When you grow in a pot with a tailored substrate, you have total control over soil structure, aeration, drainage, and root zone temperatures. A pot warms up significantly faster in the morning sun than deep ground soil, which speeds up root metabolism and accelerates growth. Because of those specific physiological advantages, there are crops that don't just tolerate living in a pot, they actually grow faster, yield heavier, suffer from fewer pests, and taste noticeably better in a container than they ever will planted in your garden beds. Let's start with one of the fastest crops in your garden, which completely transforms the moment you take it out of in-ground soil. Starting off our list at number 6, are radishes and shallow-rooted salad greens like arugula, spinach, and baby lettuce. On paper, radishes sound like the easiest garden crop in the world. The seed packet says you can harvest in 21 to 30 days. But if you've ever sown them directly into your native garden soil, you know the frustration. Split roots, woody textures, extreme bitterness, or plants that bolt straight to seed without ever forming a bulb. The reason for this comes down to physical resistance and moisture fluctuations in the ground. Even mildly compacted soil acts like concrete to a developing taproot. The radish has to fight dense clay or packed earth, which deforms the bulb and slows down growth. Any delay in growth triggers the plant's stress response, causing it to turn fibrous and painfully spicy. In a container, you completely eliminate that physical barrier because you are using a loose, aerated potting mix with plenty of perlite. The root encounters zero resistance. It expands effortlessly into a perfectly round, crisp bulb. More importantly, potting mix maintains an even moisture level that ground soil simply cannot match during early spring temperature swings. Salad greens and radishes grow rapidly with a constant, light supply of moisture and uninterrupted root aeration. You can grow an entire succession harvest of radishes and cut and come again greens in a simple 6-inch deep window box or shallow tray, resulting in sweeter leaves, tender roots, and zero soil compaction issues. Now, while radishes benefit from the loose texture of container soil, our next vegetable takes advantage of something entirely different: the thermal physics of container walls, to dodge devastating soil diseases. Coming in at number 5 are bush and dwarf determinate tomatoes. Now, if you've ever tried growing a massive indeterminate heirloom in a standard container, you know it can quickly turn into a frustrating cycle of root-bound stems and constant watering. But when you plant determinate varieties specifically bred to stay compact, containers don't just work. They offer two massive biological advantages over planting them in the ground. The first advantage is soil temperature. Tomatoes are heavy heat lovers, and their root systems won't actively absorb phosphorus and micronutrients until the soil reaches at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit in early spring. Garden soil can take weeks or even months to warm up to that threshold. A container, raised above the cold earth and exposed to ambient air and sunlight, warms up significantly faster. That thermal boost gives your young tomato plants an immediate head start, accelerating early vegetative growth and pushing them into flowering weeks ahead of garden-grown plants. The second and most critical advantage is disease isolation. In traditional garden soil, soil-borne fungal pathogens, especially verticillium wilt, fusarium wilt, and early blight linger in the ground for years. When rain hits, those spores splash directly onto the lower foliage, triggering yellowing leaves and premature plant death. In a pot, you are starting with a sterile, disease-free potting medium, because determinate tomatoes produce all of their fruit in a concentrated window. Keeping their foliage completely free from soil-borne diseases means the plant directs 100% of its energy into ripening a heavy, unblemished harvest. While tomatoes thrive on that early root warmth, our next crop takes the demand for bottom heat to an entirely different level. Coming in at number 4 is the eggplant or aubergine. If there is one plant in the nightshade family that is notorious for stalling out in early summer, it's this one. Eggplants are true tropical perennials grown as annuals, and they have an absolute zero-tolerance policy for cold, damp root zones. When you plant an eggplant in the ground, its roots often sit in cool spring soil that takes a long time to warm up. When the root temperature stays below 65 degrees Fahrenheit, the plant enters a dormant-like state. Growth completely halts, the leaves turn pale, and the plant becomes a prime target for flea beetles, which can chew through the foliage before the plant even starts flowering. Containers completely rewrite this dynamic by planting your eggplant in a 5 to 7 gallon dark-colored container. The pot absorbs solar radiation and transfers direct heat straight into the root zone. That extra bottom heat dramatically speeds up the plant's metabolic rate. Instead of sitting stagnant for the first month of the season, a container-grown eggplant establishes its root system immediately, powers through its vegetative phase, and produces strong, woody stems capable of holding heavy fruit. Plus, because containers can be positioned in the absolute warmest, most sun-drenched microclimate on your patio or driveway, you get earlier blooms, rapid fruit set, and a significantly longer harvesting window before the autumn chill sets in. Now, while eggplants use container warmth to accelerate their growth, our next vegetable uses the sharp drainage of a pot to dramatically alter its flavor and heat profile. Coming in at number 3 is the hot pepper family, including jalapenos, habaneros, serranos, and Thai chilies. While sweet bell peppers often struggle with shallow moisture swings, hot peppers have a completely unique biological relationship with containers that actually makes them produce higher yields and significantly hotter fruit. In standard garden soil, especially after heavy midsummer rains, the root system sits in continuous saturation. For sweet peppers, that might be fine, but for hot peppers, prolonged wet soil dilutes the concentration of capsaicin, the exact chemical compound responsible for their signature heat and complex flavor. Excess ground moisture also encourages excessive leafy growth at the direct expense of fruit production, leaving you with massive, bushy plants that barely set any actual peppers. Containers give you full control over drainage and moisture stress, because a potting medium with perlite drains excess water in seconds. You can intentionally let the soil dry out slightly between waterings. Once fruit begins to form, that mild, controlled water stress triggers a defensive response in the plant, causing it to ramp up capsaicin production and channel its metabolic energy into setting dense clusters of fiery, thick-walled peppers. Add in the fact that pepper roots love the elevated soil warmth of a dark pot, which speeds up the ripening transition from green to red, and containers become the absolute best environment for growing high-intensity chilies. Now, while hot peppers thrive under controlled moisture, our next crop uses containers to solve an entirely different battle, protecting delicate seedlings from devastating ground-dwelling pests. Coming in at number 2 are bush green beans. While pole beans certainly benefit from the vertical freedom of deep ground soil, compact bush varieties often run into severe biological and structural hurdles when planted in standard garden beds. The biggest vulnerability for bush beans happens in the first 2 weeks after germination. When sown directly in ground soil, bean seeds sit exposed to cool, heavy spring dampness, making them notoriously prone to damping off and seed rot before they even break the surface. And the moment those fragile, tender cotyledons emerge, they are directly in the strike zone of ground-crawling pests, particularly cutworms, slugs, and snails, which can wipe out an entire row overnight. Growing bush beans in containers solves these challenges entirely. First, elevating your containers on a patio, bench, or railing physically separates the emerging seedlings from ground-level pests, virtually eliminating early cutworm and slug damage without the need for chemical baits. Second, the superior aeration of a quality potting mix prevents seed rot, allowing for nearly a 100% germination rate. Because bush beans are nitrogen-fixing legumes, their roots establish rapidly in loose, oxygen-rich container soil. You can densely sow bush beans in a wide, rectangular trough or a 10-gallon fabric pot, creating a self-supporting, lush canopy. The plants bloom simultaneously, stay clean and off the muddy ground, and produce heavy, crisp bean flushes that are easy to harvest at eye level, without a single disease leaf. Now, while beans give you that effortless pest protection and rapid harvest, our number one vegetable offers the single biggest biological payoff of all, a crop where harvesting in ground soil is almost guaranteed to cause root damage. But growing in a pot guarantees perfection. Taking our number one spot is ginger and turmeric. If you have ever tried growing these tropical rhizomes in traditional garden soil, you know how disappointing the end-of-season harvest can be. Ginger and turmeric require an extraordinarily long growing season, often 8 to 10 months, and they have very specific underground requirements. In standard garden beds, native soil tends to pack down over months of summer watering. When rhizomes encounter compacted earth or dense clay, they become stunted, knobby, and stringy. Even worse, cold autumn rain settling in heavy garden soil right before harvest will quickly rot the rhizomes underground. And when you finally dig them up with a garden spade or fork, you inevitably slice right through your prized root clusters. Growing ginger in a container completely flips the script and delivers massive yields of plump, tender baby ginger that you simply cannot replicate in heavy ground soil. First, containers allow you to utilize the hilling technique with zero physical resistance. You start your rhizome bud in just a few inches of rich, loose potting mix in a deep container or fabric grow bag. As the green shoots grow up, you gradually add more layers of fluffy compost and potting soil. The rhizome sends out tier after tier of new, clean hands directly into that loose, obstruction-free medium. Second, the mobility of a container is a game changer for temperate U.S. climates, because containers can be started indoors under grow lights in late winter and brought inside in late autumn to escape early frost. You effectively extend your growing season by up to 2 full months. And best of all, harvest day takes zero effort and involves zero broken roots. Instead of blindly hacking into the mud with a shovel, you simply tip the container over onto a tarp. The loose potting soil falls away effortlessly, leaving you with pristine, massive, golden rhizomes, completely intact and free from soil rot. Now that we've covered the top 6 crops that biologically thrive in containers, let's look at the 3 critical rules you need to follow to guarantee this kind of success in your own container garden. Growing vegetables in containers isn't a compromise or a shortcut for gardeners without backyard space. When you match the right crop to the unique advantages of a pot, rapid root zone warming, flawless aeration, complete disease isolation, and controlled moisture, you give those plants an environment that in-ground garden beds simply cannot match. To make sure you get the maximum yield out of every pot you plant, keep these 3 non-negotiable container rules in mind. First, never compromise on drainage. Always ensure your pots have multiple unobstructed drainage holes, and use an aerated potting mix cut with coarse perlite or pumice. Standing water in a container cancels out every single advantage we talked about today. Second, adjust your watering to the root temperature. because containers warm up faster. They also dry out faster during the peak heat of midsummer. Check soil moisture daily by feeling 2 inches below the surface, rather than relying on a rigid calendar schedule. And third, feed consistently, because frequent watering gradually washes soluble nutrients out through the drainage holes. Container crops need a steady, light supply of balanced organic fertilizer or compost tea throughout the growing season. To maintain strong, continuous production, choose the right container varieties. Give them a loose, well-draining medium, and you'll find yourself harvesting cleaner, faster, and more abundant vegetables right from your patio.